What's up, guys? Jar here. Since back on October 30th, 7 months ago to the dot when Arc Raiders originally released, it's taken the world by storm in a way few games do. Even all this time later, Arc Raiders still finds itself near the top 10 most played games daily on Steam. The long story short is, Arc Raiders is still doing great, just over half a year later. And while that's all positive, there's been some uncertainty amongst the community on what the future looks like for Arc Raiders. So today, I wanted to talk about what's been going on with the narrative surrounding Arc Raiders recently, and Embark's response to it and what it means for the game going forward. Now, again, while Arc Raiders is doing great all this time player count wise, there's more to running a successful game other than the total player count every day. As a developer, you're looking to keep your players happy and coming back with new content. 50,000 concurrent players is a healthy number for any multiplayer game, but it looks a bit more questionable when you look at the bigger picture. It's normal for any game to get smaller after the initial launch, but typically you see a player return during events like new content drops, a wipe, or something of the sorts. But if you look at the peak player counts, that hasn't necessarily happened. But I think it needs a bit more explaining. You see, Embark is a smaller studio compared to other studios you may see running a game at a similar scale of Arc Raiders. It was last reported that Embark employs around 350 employees, give or take, which may seem like a lot of people, and you'd be right, that is a lot of people. But you also have to keep in mind that Arc Raiders isn't the only game that Embark works on, with the other being the finals and a new IP in development. So let's take a look at a few other extraction shooters just for comparison's sake, starting with Marathon. Marathon is from Bungie, a studio with over 850 employees as last reported in 2024, and their game launched with 3 maps, and a 4th map just a few weeks after launch. Now, keep in mind, Marathon has been in development for multiple years. Now, let's shift over to Delta Force. Team J's exact developer count isn't known, but it's a part of a huge media conglomerate and Timmy Group that employs thousands of employees, with some of them supporting Delta Force's development. And it's an extraction shooter that currently has 5 maps after its release in 2024. Escape from Tarkov is the biggest extraction shooter in the world after releasing in its closed alpha stage back in August of 2016. And it currently sits with 12 maps, being a much larger game overall, but having a lot more development time. And I think this starts to paint an interesting narrative when you circle back to Embark and Arc Raiders. Arc Raiders is a very different extraction shooter in that it doesn't force you to wipe. Typically, a wipe would reset everyone's economy, inventory, progression, and that's where the gameplay loop comes from. And usually, those wipes are massive update days to introduce new mechanics, weapons, enemies, or maps to the game. Instead, Arc Raiders lets you choose if you want to wipe or not, and gives you optional rewards and benefits for doing so players that don't wipe don't fall behind, similar to Delta Force. I think what's interesting about that optional wipe though is the content pace, which is where most players' point of contention is with Arc Raiders. See, the narrative surrounding Arc recently is that there has been very little content releasing for the game across the 7 months it's been released, and the content pace at which Embark releases things has started to frustrate players. But I think that narrative is a bit disingenuous. When you compare it to its brothers and sisters in the genre, since launch, Arc Raiders has added new weapons, gadgets, augments, enemies, and more. And all that is a great and welcome addition, but it's clear that what people deem as new content are maps, and that's what people mainly want, which we've gotten 2 of since launch. Now, I don't think the content pace is the problem per se, but I think the pace at which people want new content has changed drastically due to how service games have evolved over the years. Some of the most popular multiplayer titles in the world, such as Call of Duty, Battlefield, Marvel Rivals, and more, release content on a seasonal schedule, typically being every 3 months, give or take, and these consist of everything from maps to weapons to modes and more. Now, while those games are in a different genre completely, I think that aggressive pace of content has affected titles outside of that genre if they are primarily multiplayer, and as a result, Arc Raiders has been subjected to that same standard. But if you run the numbers on its competitors on how often they release maps, you'd find that so far, in the short lifespan Arc has had, it's actually beating them in content production by a considerable amount. Going back to Escape from Tarkov, in its alpha phase back in 2016, it launched with 2 maps, and now has 12 in its current state. That's about 1 map per year on average. Delta Force launched with 4 maps in 2024, and now currently has 5, which would be half a map a year, so 0.5 on average. Arc Raiders launched with 4 maps, and since launch, which was less than a year ago, 7 months, has added 2 more for a total of 6, with another scheduled to release in October, which is something I want to note. Now, back on May 13th of this year, Embark released a blog post on the Arc Raiders website titled, "We're Changing How We Update Arc Raiders." And in that blog post, Embark talks about their development struggles. They talked about attempting to maintain a monthly update cycle and how it's not sustainable for their company, so as a result, Arc Raiders will be moving their monthly major updates to twice a year from now on. Now, major updates are considered the ones that add additional content to the game, such as maps, weapons, enemies, and more. And while they will be less frequent going forward, they will be much larger in scale according to Embark. And naturally, When this announcement goes live, people are unhappy because they see them getting less content overall. Now, people generally hate change, especially if they deem that change to be negative. And at the surface level, this announcement sounds like the situation that they believe to be true regarding Arc Raiders' content pace is only getting worse, when in my eyes, it's the complete opposite. To me, this is Embark acknowledging that they simply cannot support such an aggressive content pace to match what other games on the market are doing, and that's perfectly fine because they aren't falling behind in their respective genre. But now they're simply matching it to a degree, even outpacing it still. Out of all the recent extraction shooters to release in our space, Arc Raiders has been the one that's been scrutinized the most, but it's also been the one that has garnered the most widespread attention, and I think those two metrics work in tandem with each other, which is important to note, as I think this is the first time a lot of players have experienced an extraction shooter before and are seeing the development pace of what that genre looks like for the first time. Assuming that the content slate stays the same across the updates, Embark will still be outpacing other extraction shooters in content delivery despite having one of the smaller teams in the industry working on a game of this scale. And the proof that they can do that is in their other game, The Finals. The Finals manages to release content updates for their title every 3 weeks, including new LTMs, cosmetics, balance changes, and more, which I just talked about in my recent video, which you can find in the top right corner. Finals also has major content updates coming every 3 months on a seasonal schedule. Now, for people that have played extraction shooters before, what Arc Raiders is going through feels normal to you because you're used to it. That's what the other games in the genre do. But to everyone else that had their first experience with the genre be Arc Raiders, things feel slow to them because it's not like any other game they've played before. Players around the world have been conditioned to expect content at such a rapid pace, and when that schedule doesn't align, it causes the reaction that we are seeing now. But if you do the math, you'll see that Arc Raiders is doing just fine, and you should take comfort in Embark accepting that the original update cadence isn't for them, and that they have a plan to ensure things stay consistent going forward. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.